All right, in this module, we're going to talk about some shipping terms and some problems that can happen during the shipment. I'm not going to go over every single term. If you look in the handouts and the PDFs for this section, you have something that looks like this. It's a chart of all the different abbreviations and what they mean. But there's two that I'm going to go over that are the most common, but there's some other ones on here that you might want to, if a supplier quotes you this or says one of these terms, like, what the heck is that? Take a look at this sheet and it'll show you everything. But the most common ones that you need to know are EXW, which stands for Ex Works. Now, we've talked about that in the past. That basically means you have to pay for everything from the door of the factory all the way to Amazon or to your warehouse or to wherever it's being shipped from. So you have to actually arrange with your freight forwarder to go pick it up at the factory. And it's your responsibility for insurance, your responsibility for all the charges, all the way to wherever its final destination is. The other one is free on board. I usually try to get my factories to do free on board because free on board, at least they'll get it to the port. So usually it's a FOB and then the port name. So maybe I'm making something in the middle of China. It might say FOB Ningbo or FOB Shanghai or FOB Hong Kong. That means that they are taking it and they're responsible for getting it from their warehouse dock and transporting it from the factory. It could be interior of China or wherever it is, all the way to the ship. Whatever ship it's supposed to go on, it's their responsibility and their cost. They'll usually bake that into your price. And so sometimes you can negotiate. If you think you can get a better price from your freight forwarder, if it's a big shipment, you might say, I want Ex Works, because you know that you can do this, arrange the shipping for $500 versus maybe your factory is going to charge you $2,000 for the same thing. So sometimes you can play with these, just understand the difference. And so once it's FOB, once it gets to that port, so if it's FOB Ningbo, that means from the time it gets to Ningbo all the way into Amazon or to your warehouse or wherever the final destination is, everything, all the expenses, all the insurance, everything is your responsibility. If something goes wrong, they've washed their hands of it. Now, another thing you have to be aware of are what's called HTS, or Harmonized Tariff Schedule. These are codes. Every product has a specific code. It's a universal code that's assigned to it. And your freight forwarder or your customs broker can often help you with these. You can also Google, or you can go to the tradelane.com and you can get these. Or sometimes you can ask your factory for these. Or another way is you can actually use a site like Panjiva or USA Import Data or Import Genius or one of those and look at the bill of ladings of other similar products that have been coming into the United States similar to yours and see what the code is on there. And that's one way to actually figure out what is the proper code. If you do the wrong code, it can cost you a lot of money. For example, I have some makeup mirrors, and they're small little portable mirrors. If those are classified as the wrong type of mirror, I can have like a 20 or 25% tariff on those. But if they're classified as the correct type of mirror, that they are small and they can go in a purse, it might be a 0% tariff or maybe a much smaller tariff. So you want to make sure you get these codes correctly. And sometimes people will try to game the system. They'll be like, well, this is actually a mirror that hangs on the wall. Let me classify it as a mirror that is a smaller mirror that's a lower code, and hopefully the customs won't catch it. Don't do that. That's going to just cause a lot of problems, and it can get you blocked from or get you blacklisted. You don't want to go through that. You don't want to game that system. Another thing that can happen when things are being shipped is they can get damaged in transit. So that's why you might want to consider the insurance. And if anything is damaged in transit, if it was FOB and it happened after that port, it's on you. Another thing is there can be miscalculations by your factory. Your factory might put on the documents that each carton is 20 by 20 by 20, when in fact they're 21 by 16 by 25. Or maybe they'll put something incorrectly on the weight. And if those miscalculations are caught, it can cost you dearly. Maybe it actually will save you money if they did it wrong and you're paying too much. But you want to double check and make sure those calculations are exactly proper on those documents. Another thing is sometimes the factories will get a little bit sneaky and they'll change from FOB to EXW, and they won't really tell you. They'll do it to save money. If you don't have this spelled out in your purchase order and your pro forma invoice, like we talked about earlier, sometimes they might try to switch this on you to save a little bit of money. So you got to be careful with that. If you got expensive items or electronic items or that are really hot, there can be pilferage. Stuff comes in. It's usually pretty safe once it leaves China, but something could get pilfered along the way from the factory to the port, or once it gets into the U.S., depending on how many stages it has to go to it. Usually if it's coming in by freight on a ship, it goes into, say, Long Beach, It's in these big containers that gets offloaded. Those containers then get taken into a warehouse and get broken down, and all that stuff gets sent out to all these different truck lines or going all over the place. And so there's all kinds of opportunity. Maybe a customs inspector opens something up to check it and doesn't tape it back really good, or maybe a box gets damaged and then some things fall out. It can happen. There's also, make sure you're aware of seasonal adjustments in pricing. For example, at Christmas time, the rates go way up on everything. So if you're selling for the fourth quarter, you might want to try to have most of your stuff arrive by like August. Because if you wait to have most of your shipments come in October or November, you're probably going to be paying more on your freight charges, just because it's a busier time of year and it's supply and demand. And remember, I've talked to this before, but the long-term storage fees on Amazon can get really, really expensive. So you really want to make sure if you're shipping directly to Amazon, you're not overdoing it. You're not just dumping stuff on them and letting them be a warehouse, because that could cut into your profits a tremendous amount. Or if you are ordering in a big bulk and you're going to feed into Amazon periodically, you're either going to have your own warehouse. You can even use a public storage unit or something like that if you live in the US, or partner with a 3PL that can store it for you at a cheaper price. And then on a periodic basis, either on automatic schedule or as you tell them, send some more units in. Another thing you want to keep in mind is sometimes a year, there can be really long check-in times. These truckers that are coming in, they have to have appointments. And sometimes it can take a week or 2 weeks, like in Ontario, California is a bad one. It can get backed up. And sometimes the stuff just sits in a truck or sits on the container for a week or 2 weeks before it gets checked in. So if anything ever has to get there quick, I will often either ship it myself from my warehouse or have my 3PL at least ship part of the order in by UPS Ground or by FedEx. Because for whatever reason, the way Amazon has their system set up with those deliveries, they seem to get some sort of priority. I don't know exactly why, but everything gets checked in a lot quicker. So you have to factor that in. So if you're trying to time your inventory orders and you don't factor in these long check-in times at certain times of year, you could run out of stock, which could really hurt you while you're waiting for something to be shipped in. And once stuff gets shipped into Amazon, you're going to see in your inventory reports, it's going to say like in stock, and there's also going to be a couple other columns in there that are like in transfer or reserved. There's like 3 columns. In stock means it's ready to ship. Someone can go, a robot or a human can go pick it, put it in a box, and send it out the door that day. If it says transfer, that usually means that Amazon is transferring stuff between warehouses. So a transfer means that Amazon has received your stuff, but for whatever reason, let's say they got 100 units in Dallas, and they know that they need to send 32 of those units to San Antonio and 40 of those units to Houston, because there's customers in those areas that tend to order that based on the algorithms and based on all the data they have. So they want to get the stuff closer to the customer so that when they order it, they can get it in one day. Or whatever the reason is. So they're moving those things. So they're actually on like Amazon trucks or Amazon partnered companies, and they're moving those. So those are not technically available to be ordered. That's what the transfer is. Reserved is usually either things that have been damaged or things that they're checking, or orders that people have placed but they haven't paid for yet. So maybe they haven't actually shipped out yet, but the customer has ordered it. Their credit card's been authorized, but it hasn't been charged, or maybe there's a problem with their credit card, so they're temporarily holding that inventory. That's what reserved means. So you need to keep all those in mind. Another thing is remember that the truckload shipments can take a long time to get checked in, and so you can save you a lot of money, but you got to build that into your time frame, into your schedule, and you also can't just basically ship it yourself. Maybe you live close to an Amazon warehouse or a fulfillment center, and there's one right down the street from you. You're like, man, why can't I just load this up in the back of my car or my trunk and just drive it down there and drop it off? You can't do that unless you have a special agreement with Amazon or special arrangement with them. You can't do that. You have to go through one of the authorized couriers in order for it to show up. Now, the good thing is when you ship in Amazon, you can use the UPS or FedEx at their ridiculously low rates. Or you can use one of their partnered carriers that will take it by truck on pallets. So these are just some common things that you need to be aware of in the shipping process. And I hope this has helped you out, and I'll see you in the next module.